found it. We found it, boys. Okay, we got to go to Twitter. I might hit my daily limit of tweets, of like viewing tweets or whatever. So this is a snippet from a YouTube video. I'm not actually entirely sure whose YouTube video it is, but this was a tweet from 2020. Yes, the hellscape that was COVID. But here we are in 2023, and I think I might have some things to say about this tweet finally. About this tweet and about this YouTube video that I have not actually looked for. So I'm actually not sure what the YouTube video itself said originally.
Universal mechanics, including the abolishment of motion inputs. I've argued with people about this in the past.
Hold on. Let's start all the way from the beginning. Yeah, we just watched Receipt trailer. We just watched it. Here we go. Sorry, Twitter compression is doo-doo, and I don't remember whose video this is. So we're just looking at a Scrub Quotes tweet. Hello? Yeah, that would be Summer. Let's try this again.
Universal mechanics, including the abolishment of motion inputs. I've argued with people about this in the past, and quite frankly, I'm done being patient with this argument. Motion inputs are an ancient relic of fighting games, and they're just simply not needed for any balancing reason at all. It is completely lazy design to balance moves around difficult motion inputs. You would not argue for this in any other genre. I'm not even going to pretend that there's a reasonable argument for motion inputs as a base core design. The old Bilbsy would have spent time explaining why. I'm done with that because no one listens to those arguments anyway. Motion inputs are not good design. They are not the future of fighting games. Clip this, quote this, do whatever you want with this. I promise you, 20 years from now, we will not be talking about motion inputs because they will be gone. Next is easily understandable.
All right. We found out the YouTuber's name. I'm not here to flame the YouTuber. I'm not here to say anything negative, actually. I'm here to agree. In 2020 and in 2021, this video got referenced a lot because of the Scrub Quotes tweet. People didn't even watch the fullness of the video. They just watched this part of the video because of Scrub Quotes. Thanks, Scrub Quotes. So, a lot of people disagreed with the sentiment that fighting games do not need motion inputs for balancing reasons, right? I think that that's the main thing. Not anything else he says about them being archaic or anything like that. Just they're not needed for balancing reasons. And I think, unfortunately for non-believers, Street Fighter 6 has put us in a situation where Scrub Quotes is unironically one of the most scrubby things in the FGC. That's what I'm saying. So Street Fighter 6 has unfortunately put us in a timeline where that might have been made true. For people who are very scared of motion inputs actually being abolished and removed. There's a whole mechanic, a whole groove, a whole control scheme based around the abolishment of motion inputs. It exists, and it's real, and it probably scares FGC boomers, and it's called modern controls. And if I'm being quite honest, I think modern controls is very healthy and very good for fighting games. That's just me. That's a personal opinion. And not only that, I also believe that it could potentially be used at the highest levels of play by someone who's very well versed at fighting games. And it also can be used at lower levels of play to get into the game, to get into the meat of the game faster. I have friends who use Modern because they come from Super Smash Bros. Melee and they come from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and they're used to button plus direction, right? That's how all of the moves in Super Smash Bros. Work. There's almost no motion inputs. I think there's motion inputs on characters like Terry, Kazuya, Ryu, Ken, because those are the fighting game characters, right? But I've seen just how effective people can be with the limited tool sets of Modern. You do lose buttons, you do lose some of your normals, but you gain access to speed. You gain access to being able to use what's the word I'm looking for here? A traditionally motion input oriented special moves at the drop of a button, at the drop of a hat. Yeah, Modern is great, and I definitely think fighting games with no motion controls can be great, but there's definitely no way motion controls as a whole are going away even 20 years from now. That's the part that I'm going to disagree with. I don't think they will ever completely abolish motion inputs. I do not. Yeah, I didn't even hear you. I didn't look at the fact that you said controls. I knew you meant input. Don't worry. I do not believe ever that we will truly get rid that every fighting game will completely remove motion inputs, because for a large majority of fighting game players, motion inputs are part of the fun of fighting games. But for other people, they are a skill gate or a barrier of certain kinds, right? So I think that knowing that a game can be balanced around a control scheme that half the people, or maybe even more, who knows how many people actually play on Modern, right? They've never showed us, they've never given us a schematic of how many people play on Modern or anything. But knowing that at least half of the player base could be using something like Modern, and it not completely breaking the game, the part that I'm really focused on here, the part that I'm honing in on, is the fact that he said motion inputs are not needed for the balance of a game. And I think that that's true. You said fart? Yeah. The part I really want to focus on here is that he said motion inputs are not needed for any balancing reason. And I think that that's true. You can use motion inputs as a way to balance, but they are not the only way to balance a game or a move. It's absolutely wholeheartedly true, and it's been proven because of something like Modern, right? Modern, I'm going to get a pad, because Modern is probably best played on pad. Okay, so in Modern, you press the special move button plus heavy, and no direction for light, level 1, back plus 2 for level 2, or down plus these 2 for level 3. And that makes using supers on reaction to things completely effortless, right? There's less things to think about, and because of that, now you can get into the meat of the game and not think, oh no, like I wasn't buffering my level 3 for when they were trying to burn me out against the wall and use a drive impact on me. Now I can just go, oh, I saw the drive impact. You know, just look at that. Boom. That was so fast. That was so much faster, right? Hey, what's up, Zach? So I think that not only are they helpful to newer players, they also reduce a lot of the decision making, a lot of the thought in decision making when it comes to being on defense and even on offense, right? Like, you don't have to tell yourself, oh, it's anti-air time, and then pass. The way you have to think of motion inputs is you have to think of them as levels, right? You think of them as levels. And to do a traditional Shoryuken for a character like Ryu or Ken, there's 4 levels to pass. I guess 3 if you're frame perfect. Forward, down forward plus punch, right? So if you are frame perfect and you do the down forward and the punch on the exact same frame, because you can actually buffer it and not do it on the exact same frame. But if you do it on the exact same frame and you're doing the actual input and none of the shortcuts, none of the down forward plus P, right? Then that is 3 levels that you have to pass. While on Modern, there's only 1 level to pass. And that level is forward plus the special move button for most of the characters that have anti or DPs like Luke, Ken, Reed, right? You lose access to the damage, but you still gain the same knockdowns. So the situation after said Shoryuken or said rising upper is the same as a player who is doing the exact same thing, but for the motion input in Classic or even in Modern, because you are allowed to do the motion inputs in Modern. I think that maybe that shouldn't exist. I don't think you should be allowed to use the motion inputs for moves that are, if the move is mapped, I don't think you should be able to do the motion input, the motion input in Modern. That's just me, but the core thing to understand here is that in a game where some players are playing on Classic, are playing on a control scheme where you have to do something on more frames than someone who's just doing it with one button, the people who are succeeding in Street Fighter 6 right now, as of a month in, at the highest level of play, are still using Classic. So that does not mean that Modern is so broken and unbalanced because of the fact that you have access to one button special moves that it becomes immediately the best thing to use in the game. Right, maybe not immediately. Who knows? 6 months down the road, this argument could be null and void, and I might have to come up with another YouTube video titled Modern is this control scheme is breaking your favorite fighting game, right? I might have to, that was a good title. I might have to do that, right? But currently, as it stands, it is just another way to be able to play the game for people who either A, have accessibility issues, B, don't want to do motion inputs, or C come from another game where motion inputs are so foreign that they are a hindrance at the lowest level of play, right? I want to go back and listen to him say that one more time so we can really revel in how he's right on part of what he said.
Universal mechanics, including the abolishment of motion inputs. I've argued with people about this in the past, and quite frankly, I'm done being patient with this argument. Motion inputs are an ancient relic of fighting games, and they're just simply not needed for any balancing reason at all. It is
That's all that matters. They're not needed for any balancing reason at all. Like I said, I know as a classic player that I cannot jump in on a modern Luke without potentially eating a that's the argument that people make. A lot of people make the argument that hey, you know, so the reason why they make this argument is because the same way I mentioned levels to doing a DP, right? How there's 3 different levels on classic, but there's 1 level on modern. This same argument comes up for things like, let's just use anti-airs in general, right? Or difference in someone jumping at you. Someone is jumping at you. You have multiple different decisions with multiple different levels of risk and levels of reward. Blocking, that is the least risk, but also the least reward, right? And that's just holding back. Then there's attempting to anti-air with like a crouching heavy punch from Ryu, or a crouching heavy punch from Luke, a back heavy kick with DJ. And that is back plus heavy kick, or back plus down and heavy punch, right? Or fierce punch, whatever you want to call it. And that is higher risk than the blocking. That is medium risk, medium reward, generally, right? But then you have something along the lines of a Shoryuken, which most of the time has true anti-air invulnerability, requires that you actually let go of blocking, right? Because you can't do a Shoryuken while holding block, so if you mess it up, you're gonna flail and do the wrong move. And it requires that you do forward, down, forward. So if you mess it up, you're either gonna get a flailed button, or you're gonna get a Hadouken, something like that, right? And that makes it the highest risk, but because you get the knockdown, the highest reward. And a lot of people say that because of the fact that it's locked behind a motion input, it leads to 3 different potential decisions where you have to choose between if you want to just block and be safe and eat the mix-up after, if you want to attempt an anti-air that doesn't have full anti-air invulnerability and possibly get stuffed, but if you get it, then it's at least medium reward and you push them back to a range that you feel comfortable at, or you get a knockdown. But if you're wrong, you get the wrong button, right? That's what a lot of people say. I think specifically for special moves, we've already established that there's a lot of games that have come out, like DNF Duel, like Grand Blue with its cooldown system, like Fantasy Strike, like Rising Thunder, like they plan on doing with a game like the League of Legends fighting game, Project L. I hope the name changes before that game comes out. And I'm trying to think of another game that has simple inputs off the top of my head. I can't think of one like off the top of my head. Sorry. I think that's a good amount though. That there are ways to balance simple input or simple input special moves other than just locking them behind a motion input, right? They require more mana, or they have a longer cooldown, or in the case of Street Fighter 6, they do less damage. You just generally lose 20%. You cannot stop the fact that you are losing 20% because you use the easy input version of your special move. That's just how it works. Same thing with the supers. Now, I won't say that one button supers aren't a little broken, right? I come from Soul Calibur and Soul Calibur 6 specifically. I started playing in Soul Calibur 3. I wasn't like super amazing at 3 or anything, but I did well enough in my local area. Soul Calibur 4 and 5, I really came into my own and got significantly stronger as a player. Sorry for my hair, apologies. But Soul Calibur 6 is where I've had the best online and offline results for a fighting game ever. And we've had to have the same argument in Soul Calibur 6 that people are having about modern controls in Street Fighter 6. Because of the fact, hey, they're both 6s, funny. Because of the fact that we actually have one button super moves. Our super moves are not invulnerable, but they are extremely fast in comparison to a lot of the other things in Street Fighter, right? In Soul Calibur. Soul Calibur, normally buttons are anywhere between for the faster ones, you're looking for 12. You're looking from 12 to 20 frames, right? Those are the among the fastest buttons in the game, and our supers are 16 frames, which means that if you could normally whiff punish something with a 20 frame launcher without having to really think too much about it, instead you could press one button instead of two. Instead of pressing down forward plus vertical to launch, right? You can instead press right trigger and just get a giant cash out of damage, a knockdown, and potentially even Oki depending on the character. And that is the vast majority of supers. The vast majority of supers are 16 frames, and they are unsafe to 16 frames, which means that they are unsafe to other supers, right? There's a few 12 frame supers, there's a few 20 frame supers, a few 18 frame supers, but the vast majority of them are 16 frames and minus 16. And we, as a collective community, already had this argument that our one button supers too powerful, and ours don't even have invul. So I could see the arguments for modern having one button supers being too powerful, but everything else in modern feels extremely balanced. Even the supers, right? Like, I know I can't throw a fireball at Cammy from full screen against a modern player. I probably shouldn't do it against a classic player either. But do I think that special moves and super moves had to be balanced around the fact that they are one button? No. I don't think that they changed anything about the way they designed special moves in Street Fighter 6 for modern. Anti-air DP still exist. Supers with full invul still exist, at least most of them. I don't think that modern is powerful enough by itself, even with one button, supers and specials, to say that special moves and supers cannot be balanced in other ways because of the fact that they're one button. So this tweet and this quotes article and this YouTube video, maybe there's other things in there that are wrong, but I think the first line here that he says, or I guess the second line, because I don't think super moves will ever, I don't think motion inputs will fully be abolished in 20 years. But I think what he says right here.
With people about this in the past, and quite frankly, I'm done being patient with this argument.
We're gonna listen to it one more time.
Inputs are an ancient relic of fighting games, and they're just simply not needed for any balancing reason at all. It is completely lazy design to balance moves around difficult motion inputs. You would not argue for this in any other genre. I'm not even going to pretend that there's a reasonable argument for motion inputs as a base core design.
And he's right, because no other genre has those things. The only way that they have things locked behind difficult motion inputs is when they are a bug, usually, right? They're usually a bug or an exploit. Wave dashing in Melee. Other genres do have things like that, though. Yeah, they're usually unintended by the developers, and then they get left in, unless it's Rocket League. Rocket League is a physics-based game, so you have to have that, right? Action games like DMC, that is a single player game where when you miss something, it's not the same. A single player game and a multiplayer game can be balanced vastly differently because you are not worried about what another person is doing plus what you're doing. You're worried about a CPU. And CPUs have patterns and they have tells, and you can like get used to what they're doing. Sure, you could say the same thing about humans, but it's significantly different when a human is trying to adapt to you. A boss in a video game is not. Right? They're just not. That's not how bosses in video games work. And I think that that's where this argument stems from, as someone who plays other competitive multiplayer games, right? In Halo, we used to have an exploit in older Halo games. I think it was Halo 1, Halo 2. I can't remember exactly which one. I'm younger than a lot of the other Halo, like older Halo players. So I don't remember this exactly off the top of my head which Halo game it was from. But it was called BXR. And the reason why it was called BXR is because those were the inputs you had to press in quick succession to quickly melee, swap to your gun, and shoot. B for melee, X to quickly start a reload and then shoot, or vice versa. I don't remember the exact thing, but that would kill any enemy Spartan, any enemy player, in one interaction if you were in close range. That was the entire point of it. It has been removed from every other Halo. It no longer exists in Halo. It was an exploit. It was a glitch. It was a bug, right? It wasn't something that developers wanted to leave in. It was a difficult input, not a motion input per se, but a difficult input for the vast majority of the community, especially the casual community. And instead of leaving it in and allowing players who could master it, who could hone it to have the fruits of their labor. Instead, they removed it. I think it was 2. Thanks, Creeper. You're older than me. You would remember, right? So I'm not here to advocate for every fighting game to not have motion inputs. I'm saying that there is a world where motion inputs are not required for balance reasons, and it doesn't have to change the overall flow of a video game. And I think Street Fighter 6 and modern controls has proven that. And I don't think it's particularly close how many more people we see in top 48s, top 32s, and top 8s using classic than modern so far. I think I've only seen 2 modern players in all of like top cuts for, I say top cut because card game brain, sorry, in top cuts for big events, right? I think there was a big Japanese event where a modern player got very far, made it to like top 48, top 16. And then there was one modern player in the top 96 or top 192 of CEO, as far as I can remember. That's not a lot. That's a pretty small amount of players for the amount of advantage that people seem to believe that the exact same move would give you in modern that it gives you in classic. You trade upsides for downsides, and I think I really like that. Losing access to some of your normals, but gaining access to the speed and quickness of a special move at the press of a button. And it really reminds me of something like DNF Duel. In like a good way, in like a healthy way. I don't think DNF Duel's special moves being one button were inherently unhealthy in like any circumstance. I think like everyone having access to one button DP felt annoying at the beginning of the game until we realized how many safe jumps everyone had, so it didn't matter anyway, right? Anyways, if you enjoyed this talk segment, if you enjoyed any of my content, if you're like watching like 5 or 6 videos on loop and you got to this one and none of these other videos told you, hey, you should subscribe to the channel and like the video, leave a comment down below about how you feel about modern controls, how you feel about the balance of fighting games using something like motion inputs and motion inputs in general. Do you think motion inputs should go? Do you think motion inputs are a needless barrier to entry for everyone who's ever played a fighting game ever? Or do you think they're really cool and they're really sick and they make for more intense gameplay decisions? Anyways, this has been Beanie Thuggish for the YouTubes, signing out and saying peace.